Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome to another episode of the Clean Libertarian Podcast. And are you guys ready? Going to release this on Sunday, so that means, Turkey Day is right around the corner. Wherever you're going, whatever you're doing, if you're traveling, be safe. If you are staying at home, eat lots of turkey and dressing or whatever staples that you're going to have there. I know that we are traveling out of state ourselves, and should be fun to see everybody and just kind of reconnect. But whatever you're doing, if you're in this deal, in this recovery thing, doing this journey with us, don't hesitate to reach out. So many of us get real squirrely this time of year for various different reasons. But, anything involving your family seems to be something that we trip up over quite a bit. And so if you are traveling, I hope you're listening to this because this is a great story of recovery. I had Derek on, a.k.a. Subby from Twitter. This guy shares a very clear and concise message of Alcoholics Anonymous. He has a very potent, powerful story, and I just hope that you enjoy it. So without any further ado, here is Derek. All right. Thanks a lot for showing up, Derek. How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing well, man. I'm doing real well. How about yourself?
Man, everything is good here. I'm down like 22 pounds.
Oh, hell yeah. Hell yeah.
On this keto, which, I mean, here's the thing, man. You started out, you know what I'm saying? And you drop a shitload and then it's like, it stops and then you get discouraged. So
sure.
That's the point that I'm trying to move past. But,
Sure. And like that, I mean, I love health and fitness. I'm trying to gain weight right now and put on some size. So I'm like doing the opposite of you. I'm trying to eat as much as possible, which is hard to do. But, it takes a long time to gain the weight, and sometimes it takes a long time to lose the weight. But like us, like instant gratification. I want it fucking now, god damn it.
Right? Fuck yeah, dude. Yeah, we tend to get like that, don't we?
Yeah, a little bit sometimes. Sometimes. Yeah.
And you got to kind of work. Like, do you think it's the culture? I mean, obviously, as addicts, that's kind of like one of those things. Hedonism, instant gratification, but it feels like the culture is moving more towards that.
Absolutely. And this is something my wife and I talk about with my friends. I mean, obviously as an alcoholic, like I can look back on my childhood and be like, oh yeah, like you wanted it and you wanted it then. But then I even think like society as a whole, with social media and this constant stream of sensory information, and how can I make myself feel good right now? And so
Right.
I think as a culture, we definitely have shifted to where it's not just isolated to like alcoholics, drug addicts, or spiritually sick people. It's, I mean, normal people are like, I want it now, that instant gratification. So who knows? I'm guessing it has to do with society and like everything going on. But I mean, I don't have the answers to everything, but I can definitely hypothesize that we ain't doing ourselves any favors with everything we got going on. So
without a doubt, man.
Yeah.
Without a doubt. Amazon Prime, streaming television. I mean, it's all,
I mean, we got computers in our back pockets.
Yeah, dude.
I can get any bit of information. I can shop, on my phone. I can do almost everything I need to do on my phone. And so it's definitely I remember, I don't know, I think you were probably pretty much the same age, or you're maybe a little older, but I remember, getting on the internet as a 12, 13-year-old, and you had dial up, you had to wait for the modem,
man.
and you're 12 years old trying to download that one porn pic, and you're like, come on before mom gets home, and it's like it ain't like that no more.
Nah, man, that was the CompuServe Prodigy days. That was back then.
Exactly.
Yeah, bro.
Exactly.
I remember. I'm still a putz when it comes to technology. I remember when we got our first CD-ROM in the home PC, and I somehow managed to delete the drive, and like none of us knew how to fix it.
It
was like a week after we got it. Yeah, I was in trouble on that one.
I'm not Mr. Technology. I leave that to my wife, and I mean all the young kids in my office. They help me out. My email was down for 4 hours today, and I just about had an aneurysm. So, I let everybody else handle that, and I try not to do anything to owe any amends in the process.
Oh yeah, for sure, man, for sure. That's the trick. Because like it's like your whole world just dissolves in front of your eyes, and it's like, oh, you
Yeah,
got to be cool, dude. Got to be
yeah,
cool.
exactly. And like I'm so selfish that it's like I've got to get my shit done because my shit's most important. And if I don't get this done in time, then I can't go to the gym. I can't get home in time to watch football tonight. I can't do this. And it's like usually like, things that are happening in my life, my first instinct is to think about how it impacts me, nobody else. So
Yeah, without a
yeah.
doubt. Well, man, Derek, I've been following you for a while on Twitter. We've had a lot of great interactions. You're among the top tier class of sobertarians, and I wanted to kind of hear your story, man. How did you get into this crazy thing we call recovery?
Yeah, so I mean, it's I come from a family, like if you look at our family tree, there's you look up at it and it's alcoholic, dope fiend, alcoholic, dope fiend, alcoholic, dope fiend, littered all across the board.
Right.
But even so, like I grew up in a sober household. My dad currently has 30 plus years of sobriety. My mom
Dang.
had 20 years. She's no longer sober and she's out doing her thing. But I grew up in a fairly loving home. And, as a kid, I look back and I remember like I was always kind of that kid that had like fear and anxiety and, just kind of always in a constant state of worry. Right. And
Yeah.
nothing was ever really good enough. And so I like to use the analogy of, I'm like the kid on Christmas. I get all my fucking toys and I'm stoked. I'm happier than a pig in shit. And hell yeah, I got all my toys. Couple days later, I go out and neighborhood kids are showing off their toys. And, Jimmy across the street got the super soaker that's just better than mine. And because Jimmy got that super soaker and I didn't, my parents don't love me, and I'm not good enough and I'm never going to be loved. And,
Yeah.
so it just, I'm always, even at a young age, I was comparing my insides to everybody else's outsides. And
Uh,
it was a losing game. And, and so, at 13, my parents split up and, I was always kind of that rebellious kid that was always questioning authority, got into trouble and, huge athlete, played a lot of sports, but did well in school and recognized like, hey, I gotta behave somewhat so then I can get away with being a dickhead in other areas, so I've always kind of been manipulative and, how can I suit things to for the situation so I can do what I want to do. And, so at 13, my parents split up and, hanging with the buddies on the baseball team. And we stole a bottle of, aftershock is what it was. You remember
ooh.
that? Yeah. That
Yeah, man.
cinnamon with the crystals.
Damn, that's a blast from the past right there, buddy.
Exactly. That's some
Damn.
old school. And so we're sitting down and I take a pull off that bottle and, now looking back, like, and having the experience of reading the doctor's opinion, like that phenomenon of craving hit immediately. And I took a pull off that bottle and I passed it to the right and we're passing it around. And as it's getting passed around, I'm locked. My eyes are locked on that fucking bottle because I can't wait till it gets to me. And, I proceeded to get absolutely smashed that night and, have a good time, blackout. And, it was with some buddies on the baseball team. And so we had a game the next day. And, I live out here in Southern California and out in like East San Diego. It gets pretty warm during the summer. It can get up to 105. And we're playing baseball. That I had a game that next day. And I'm sitting in the infield and the dust is blowing and I'm hungover. And I'm not thinking about how bad I feel. I'm not swearing off booze. I'm thinking, man, I can't wait till I get to do that again. And so that kind of started my journey into pursuing that night, for the next 12 to 13 years, chasing it to the gates of insanity and death. And
Oh,
so yeah, that like booze gave me that sense of relief. That first drink, it was,
yeah.
it was the solution to my problems. And I identify with that where, I don't, today, my understanding is booze isn't the problem. Booze is the solution to my problem and life is my problem. And so, you know, the long and the short of it, I drank and smoked a lot of weed and, started getting into the heavier stuff around 16, 17. And, I played baseball pretty much all throughout high school until my senior year. You know, uh, I got kicked off that baseball team because of my partying. And so, I'd crash cars. And so like I had a significant amount of consequences pretty early on in my drinking, and lost jobs, and it was getting pretty severe. And somewhere in that time in high school, I'd mentioned my mom had been sober for 20 years. My mom started drinking again, and she went to AA when I was younger, but I think, looking back, she stopped going to AA, stopped and, talking to her sponsor, so on and so forth. And, that drink comes, if you're a real alcoholic, if I'm not treating my spiritual condition, I'm going to fucking drink,
Yep.
And sure enough, the day came where it was time to drink, and she drank. And at that point, she was trying to rein me in. At this point, I hated my pops because he left my mom, and just blaming everybody for the poor little life I had, right?
Yeah.
I was a victim of life, and so she started drinking, and there was really no accountability or oversight. And so my drinking really accelerated and took off. And once I got kicked off that baseball team, and it was me and the buddies. I hung out with the Lodies in high school. I found that crowd, and we were drinking before school, smoking joints, and ditching class. And so I graduated high school by the skin of my teeth, and it was full go once high school was over. And getting girlfriends and them getting tired of my drinking, after a couple months, they're like, man, like, I like to party, but this is just a little too much for me. Right.
Yeah.
So yeah. And then, I don't know I know you do more Narcotics Anonymous, correct? So I'm sure you have a extensive, drug background, right? Or party favors, whatever we want to call
absolutely.
them. Right.
Yeah.
And it's definitely part of my story. I got very, we're pretty close to the border, and so cocaine is readily available, and it's of pretty good quality. And so I started doing lots of cocaine, and I was always that guy that, like, I would get hammered, and go to work and be sitting at work at 19 years old, and I'm like, man, I'm never doing that again. And come 3 o'clock, I'm getting off work in that liquor store or the buddy's house. I'm like, oh, I'm just gonna stop by and have a beer. And I would stop by, and I was gonna have just one.
Yeah.
And then lo and behold, here it is, 4 a.m, and I'm, blown out of my mind, and I got to be at work in 2 hours. And I'm like, how the fuck did this happen again?
Damn it. Yeah.
And, so that was the deal. And, there was a period at about 19, I kind of like, I was working construction, and I was not having it. I was like, fuck this. I gotta do something with my life. Right. I gotta get it together. And so I'm just going to smoke weed. I'm not going to fucking drink. The drinking's the problem. The cocaine's the problem. And I was actually able to do it for a good 6 or 7 months. And, I went back to school and started doing really well there, and really applying myself. And so, like, I was able to always, like, get it together for long enough to try to, like, build it back up and get some semblance of responsibility and success going. And eventually the day comes where see, that's the problem with, like, marijuana maintenance for me, is I'll smoke weed but then I'll forget I can't drink. And so it's
Right.
like I'll start drinking again. And I was out, and I'm a smaller guy. I'm like 5'6" on a real good day, and 150 pounds, especially when I'm drinking. And I drink Jack Daniels and do a lot of cocaine when I drink. And so I get pretty mouthy, and I tend to get mouthy with the wrong people. And, one night we're out and we're partying, and I get mouthy with the wrong guy and get into an altercation, a fight, and get the shit kicked out of me. And in the process of getting in that fight, I got tackled, and my leg gets twisted up and contorts in a fucked up way, and I look down and my foot's hanging the other way, turned around the way it's supposed to be hanging, and I broke my tibia and fibia. And so what does the doctor do? I'm getting loads of Percocet at will. And so, I'm eating Percocet and smoking weed. And every time, it's funny, every time I'd go into the doctor, she's like, what's your pain level? 10, 10,
Yeah.
10. And so after about 4 months of that, she's like, okay, you're not at a pain of 10 anymore. We got to cut you off these things. And, I developed a nice little opiate habit at that point. And, one night I'm kind of withdrawn, not feeling too good a couple days after finally being cut off. And I hit up a buddy of mine about, hey, man, can you get me some Vicodin? And he's like, no, but I got something better. And this is when OxyContin was like, before they made them to where you could abuse them, right? Where you could take a hose clamp, shave them up, and actually crush them up and smoke them. And he comes over and he hooks me up with some oxys. And it was great because I was like, man, this is phenomenal. The girlfriend's happy. I'm not drinking. I'm not stoned. I'm just kind of mellow, and I can interact and I can function, go to class. And after a while, that oxy habit gets a little too expensive, and then comes the the black tar heroin. That's what we've got down here. And I started out smoking it, and I'm smoking it and still going to school, still functioning, and I'm not drinking, but I'm not drawing a sober breath. I'm first thing in the morning, I'm chasing the dragon, going to class, chasing the dragon in the bathroom at work, and so on and so forth. And I decided San Diego's the problem. And this is how good like my thinking is at solving problems. I don't know if you're familiar with Chico State University. So it's a college up in Northern California that is just absolutely notorious. Like I think in the 90s it was voted by Playboy like the #1 party school in the country. And so I'm living down in San Diego, and I think San Diego's the problem. I'm going to move to Chico to get away from partying, because the heroin's down there. So I end up moving to Chico, and I get sober. Well, not sober. I kicked dope for about a 2-week period, but in that 2 weeks, I'm at the bar every single night, and I'm drinking all day, every day. And so I get tired of that, and I come up with the grand plan. I'm gonna start driving on Friday after class. I'm gonna drive down to San Diego, pick up an ounce of dope, and bring it up there. I'm gonna sell it, and I'm gonna be able to fund my dope habit, because there's no dope up here, so I can sell it at an extra premium, and it'll be great. And that lasted about 2 trips where I was actually selling enough to finance the next trip. And the long and the short of it is, that's where I got introduced to shooting up there. A guy, I was running low one day, and he's like, hey man, like, it'll stretch out a lot farther if you just bang it. And that was one of those things that I swore I'd never do. I was like, I will never stick a needle in my arm. And here I am, at college, in university, on my way. I wanted to be a doctor, majoring in biology and actually doing well. And I'm sticking a needle in my arm. And the progression, that's where the progression kind of accelerated. And I like shooting cocaine with my heroin, and obviously that doesn't work out too well. Like speeding the heart up, slowing it down, it kills people pretty quickly. And I'm shooting dope one night, and my buddy ODs and dies in front of me. And that's kind of started like my whole journey coming in and out of Alcoholics Anonymous and in recovery rehabs. And so tough little guy like I am, what I do is I call mom, after that incident, and I'm crying, I need to get sober, and so I come out of school, drop out of college, and I come back down to San Diego, and I got into rehab. And that was my first time in rehab. And in that rehab, the dude is my counselor. I still remember it like it was yesterday. I think he saw right through the bullshit that I was spewing. He looks at me and he says, kid, you're so fucked up that you're gonna have to like live in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous.
Oh shit.
And I look at him
Oh
and
shit.
I'm just like, what the fuck do you know? You're
Right.
full of shit, you know?
Right.
And in there, you know, I when I went into that rehab, I was about 135 pounds, you know, not doing too well, but like they're feeding me 4 times a day. I'm gaining weight. After the first 2 weeks, I start sleeping. So I'm starting to feel good after that 28 days. You know, day 24, 25, you know, that tick comes in and it's like, man, I can do it just one more time. You know, I can get loaded. So I start coordinating, you know, from the rehab to have my dope dealer pick me up at rehab. And he picks me up at rehab and I'm smoking dope in the parking lot of the fucking rehab. And, you know, I wasn't going to go back to the needles. I'm just going to smoke it. The needle was the fucking problem. And about 3 days later, I'm crossing the border and I'm in Mexico shooting dope in a shooting gallery. And, you know, so for the next 3 years, it was in and out of rehabs and sober livings, recovery homes. You know, and every time it was like, I'm not doing this again. Like I can't keep doing this. And then the delusion, you know, and there would be times I'd be in rehab, the delusion that like I could drink, you know, like dope's the problem. I can drink and smoke weed. And I'd get out of rehab and I'd, you know, maybe stay sober for a few days, a week, 2 weeks at most, and start going to AA, get a sponsor. And then the idea would come across my mind like, man, I can have a beer. It's no big deal. And you know, I'm the type of guy that pretty quickly after taking a drink, that craving kicks in. And I'm on the blue line, which is the trolley. So it's like the public transit down to TJ. It takes you right up to the border. You walk right across and you got, it's Disneyland for adults. That's what I call Tijuana, Mexico.
Wow.
You can get anything you want and have the time of your life. And so, you know, I did that. And eventually what happens is, you know, I obviously committing all kinds of crime to finance my habit. You know, I'm stealing from, I had a pretty few good little schemes going that like was able to finance my habit. And you know, I eventually that caught up with me. And one day I'm shooting dope with a buddy and a detective calls me and she's like, hey, Mr. Pets, you know, or Mr. Derek, we need to come talk to you and ask you a few questions. And I said, well, you know what? Catch me if you fucking can, and hung up the phone. And later that night, I'm driving down the street, and little did I know, one of my taillights was out.
Oh no.
And a cop lights me up. And so I get booked. I had dope and paraphernalia all on me. So I got charged. I got booked on the drug charges. And as I'm going to court to be arraigned on the drug charges, the judge looks at me and says, hey, Mr. Derek, so we actually have some people that have been looking for you. And he proceeds to arraign me on about, I think it was 5 counts of commercial burglary. And you know, like my gut just sank down, and I'm like, oh my God, like I'm fucked. And you know, so I knew I'd been hanging out around rehab, and like, you know, my jailhouse lawyer was advising me, dude, why don't you just ask for like a program that'll save you. And so I asked for a program, and the judge he said, yeah, you can go to a program, and if you finish that program, you know, then we'll waive the drug charge, but these burglary charges we're still gonna charge you on. So I went to a program, and I was at this place that's pretty well renowned here in San Diego, and it's I call it like big book boot camp, where
Right.
you know, you have guys coming in that graduated the program 30 years ago, and there's AA meetings there every single day, and they're sitting on the porch with you and, you know, asking, what step are you on? And you know, I'm in this place and I get a sponsor and I start chicken shit working the steps. And you know, but in the back of my mind I had the idea like, man, I'm just gonna do what I'm told until I get off paper, and then I can go do what I want to do. And that didn't last all but I think 4 months. I stayed sober in that place, and then eventually the day comes where like it's time to drink. And I wasn't willing to take that first step, that I was powerless over alcohol. So if I don't believe I'm doomed to die an alcoholic or drug addict death, why would I do the rest of the steps to the best of my ability? And so I was chicken shitting them, and the day came where I had to drink. And I come back to that facility one night to try to sneak my way into bed, and I was burnt, and I proceeded to get kicked out. And at this point,
Damn.
yeah, at this point, so it starts running through my head. I'm fucked. The judge is gonna be pissed. Yada yada yada. And I got kicked out. Call mom, and God bless her. She took me in one last time, and I'm living in her house, and I convinced her that I didn't get kicked out for getting loaded. I got into a fist fight with a guy, and that's why I got kicked out. All about probably 3 to 5 days of staying with her. I'm stealing her checkbook and writing hot checks, and going down to Mexico. And one of my trips down to Mexico, she calls me as I'm sitting on the trolley, and she says, "You're no longer fucking welcome at my house, and if you come anywhere near our house or call me, I will be calling the police." And for the next, I think it was 3 weeks, I was living on the streets and doing whatever I had to do to get a drink in me. And one day I'm coming down off methamphetamine and drinking a tall boy, and I don't even do methamphetamine. Definitely not one of my favorite substances to ingest. And so I'm coming down off meth, and I'm sitting in a park, and I remember it was like a Sunday afternoon. I'm sitting in this park, and I'm looking at families and looking through my cell phone, and I'm trying to find one more person that I can call to run game on, that I can convince to let me stay on their couch, give me $10, just give me some help. And there was not one person in my phone book that I could call to run. And I had burnt pretty much every bridge that I had. And so at this park, it was along a busy street, and a city bus would come by every 15 or 30 minutes, going probably about 50 miles per hour. And my best idea, I'm an idea guy, right? Like, I don't know if you identify with this, but I always have a bright idea to keep the gig going, and I'm so thankful for that moment in time, that day drinking, that feeling that I felt there, where my best option was to jump in front of that city bus. And that was the best idea I could come up with. And thank God, and I credit this to God. I'm a big believer in God, and when I say God, higher power, whatever that conception is to you, I believe God came in at that moment and gave me like just a little bit of like clarity to call a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I called the dude, and he said, "You know what, kid, be there, stay there. I'll be there in 10 minutes." And he comes and picks me up, and he takes me to a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. And in that meeting, I realized I was the only one in there that wanted to eat a fucking bullet. Everybody else was laughing and smiling and having a great time. And I was the only one that was hating life and wanting to check out, right?
Yeah.
And so, that kind of started. That was my first day sober. The next day was my first day sober. I ended up going up to another facility way up in the mountains, and it's 50 dudes on a big dirt lot. They got miniature golf on a dirt course. We rake lines in the dirt. They're called Serenity lines, and it's big. It's like, if the first place I went to was Big Book Boot Camp. This was like Big Book Boot Camp on steroids. And So I get there, and in my first day there, I sit down, and the moderator, God bless his heart, he's no longer with us. He looks at me and he says, "You know what, kid? You need to find God or fucking die."
Ooh.
And it just kind of
Ooh.
like, oh shit.
Yeah, man. That's the real deal, though, man. That's the real deal right there.
Yeah, it was no joke about it. He didn't, the guy didn't care about my feelings. He didn't care about what I thought. He didn't care about like my childhood and like, any of the bullshit victim stories that I could tell him. All he cared about was I taking spiritual actions to overcome my alcoholism. And he said, "You know what, kid, you need to find God or die." And, at this point, I'm pretty fucking atheist. I'm like, fuck God. I'd went to a Christian school, and in that school, it was like Baptist Christian school. And they said, if you don't accept Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior, you're burning in hell. And I wanted no part of that God. And so I was pretty resistant to the idea of God, and but I expressed that like the fear of drinking was greater than the fear of like coming to believe in God, because I knew drinking wasn't gonna fucking do it. I was at that uncle moment where it's like, dude, just tell me what to fucking do. And I got into action, man. And he in that place, like we would read from the doctor's opinion all the way through into action and start over. Doctor's opinion into action, and as new guys would come in, we'd go back to the doctor's opinion. And so I got busy in Alcoholics Anonymous there, man. And I did a third step prayer, and then I wrote it an inventory, and I'd written inventories before, and they were kind of bullshit chicken shit inventories where I'm like, oh, I'm gonna look cool for sponsor, this is the shit he wants to fucking hear, like. But like on this inventory, like I remember I sat there and I was like, man, there was some shit, like I got sexually abused as a child, and like all of the grimy, like just dirty criminal shit that I had done. I'm like, fuck, I'm not telling another man this shit, and I put it on that paper, and I was just willing to be as honest and thorough as possible, and as God would allow me to be. And that guy would tell me, like, man, if you're having trouble being honest on this paper, why don't you hit your knees and ask God for the direction before you start writing? And I just did it. Like, I didn't believe this shit was gonna work. I was like, fuck, how is this fucking hippie fucking shit gonna work? This is a
junior counselor bullshit.
yeah, this is a
Yeah.
bunch of hocus pocus Easter bunny bullshit. Like, what the fuck? Like, nah. Like, I'm a redneck from East County, San Diego. Like, I don't believe in this spiritual woo woo shit, And so I
Oh shit.
just did it, and it was awesome because I did my fifth step, and I told that man that stuff, and I told him everything, and then I did step 6 and 7, and this was probably about 60 days into being sober, and I did step 6 and 7, and I believe I attribute this to like starting to develop that conscious contact with God. I did it. I did step 6 and 7 up on the hill, kind of like overlooking everything. And I came walking down that hill, and like for the first time in my life, like I felt like the weight of the world was off my shoulders. And I don't get along with a lot of people. I'm a very small circle type of guy, and these are my friends. And I was filled with anger. Like, I didn't know what anger was until you removed alcohol. Then I was fucking angry. It was like, fuck the world. And so I hated everybody up there, but I kind of noticed after doing step 6 and 7 and getting into some action, like I hated my roommates just a little less, and I was actually able to sleep at night. And like, instead of having the fucking hamster wheel going all night and thinking about how I need to get a job, and worried about like how in debt I am I going to go to jail, all this stuff. And I just started to finally have a sense of relief. And that man up there, that moderated those classes. He was huge on, okay, a new guy's come in, you're up to this point. Now it's your job to show them how to get up to your point. And so, it's a 3-month program. I ended up staying up there for 6.5 months because nobody would take me in. Like the parents were like, no, we've seen this before. You've gotten sober before just to fuck us over. Like
Right.
that is not happening. And I ended up staying up there for 6.5 months. And in that 6.5 months, man, like we would do big book studies, and I was involved in, helping the new guy. Couldn't make any amends because I was stuck up there. My sponsor was very clear about, no, we make amends in person. You ain't writing a fucking letter. You've got to go face the wreckage you've done. You don't get the luxury of sending it in the mail
Right.
to make something right. And so eventually I get out of that, get down from that hill, and I move into a recovery home. And in getting into that recovery home, I'm like, I got these grandiose ideas of like the job I'm going to get. And my sponsor looks at me, I'm telling him my plan. And he's like, motherfucker, you need to walk to any store that is close to here. And the first place that offers you a job, you fucking take.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah, man.
and I look at him like, well, that's fucking kind of rude. I'm better than that. And I end up getting a job at a fucking call center. And I'm just like, I'm like, fuck this. And he's like, well, if you don't like that job, why don't you keep looking for another? And, he was very adamant about, yeah, go find your job, go do that. But like your primary purpose needs to be Alcoholics Anonymous. And you need to make that the forefront and the focal point of your life. And he's the guy, like sitting in a meeting, a new guy would share. And, sometimes new guys, I don't know if you've seen this, at a meeting, they share and then they immediately like go running out the back door to get away from getting cornered from people. And he would look at me and he said, if you don't fucking go get him, I fucking will. And so I'd jump up and go find new guys, and that was like what he told me. And I started making amends. And he was very clear because my parents, I had made amends to them before. He's like, dude, you need to show them that you're actually going to stay sober before you get to go make those amends, and so it was in the big book. One of my favorite lines is elimination of drinking is but a start. A much more important demonstration of our principles lies before us in the respective homes, occupations, and affairs. And he stressed that. He's like, man, like drinking is just the beginning, dude. You need to become a brand new person and act better. Like these set of principles are how you act. Like, cool. The first step's the only one that deals with booze. The rest is to teach you not to be a selfish fucking asshole.
Bingo. There it is. Yep.
And that's my problem. Like when you get down to brass tacks, like, my problem with life is Derek. It's not anybody else. It's not booze. Booze is just the way I deal with the guilt and the shame and the selfishness that I'm consumed with. And so, yeah, man, I got immersed in Alcoholics Anonymous, and like, I was in this recovery home and I was pretty tired of it. And like, he had me go back and make amends to my former employer that I had stolen from and done all kinds of rotten shit to. And I go back and I make amends in that office, and I'm working a dishwashing job, and I'm bitching about my dishwashing job. And he's saying, you got a job and all that spiritual sponsor shit that you just don't want to hear. Like when you're in it and I'm bitching, I don't want to hear that. Like, do you trust God? Like, you have a job? Like, fuck you. Don't you hear my problem? Like, how's that going to help my problem? And
yeah, man.
So I made amends to that former employer, and about a month later, of washing dishes and just doing what I'm told and doing Alcoholics Anonymous, that employer calls me up and says, hey, you know what, guy? We actually need some help. We're picking up on work. You want to come in and sit down and see if you're willing to come back? And I ended up staying with that company for 8.5 years, and that's got me into the industry that I'm in right now, and has been pivotal in the life I have today. And so I ended up getting that job, going to sober living. And, one of the funny things is we were going to this speaker meeting, and it was about 250, 300 people at this speaker meeting on a Saturday night. And me and my buddy, my little road dog, I would go and pick him up all the time. We'd go to meetings, and that's all we did was Alcoholics Anonymous, right? And we go and we're setting up this meeting, and I'm doing the coffee there. We're setting up chairs, and it's like three of us setting up this whole meeting. And I'm bitching and complaining to my sponsor the whole time, because it's kind of like the date night meeting down here in San Diego, where like all the young kids come, they bring their girlfriends, and I'm sitting there and I'm bitching. I'm like, dude, like, fuck these guys. They're all fucking running around, getting pussy, living life. And he looks at me and says, hey, do you want what they have? And I'm like, yes, I need some vagina in my life. Like, this is some bullshit. And, a couple weeks later, you hear a story about how that guy and that girl got loaded. And then he'd look at me and he'd say, Derek, do you want what they have? And I finally started to get it. And I'm like, that's what he fucking needs, And, so that was like my first year and a half in Alcoholics Anonymous, was just only AA, work in AA. And, life got really good, man. And, I've been sober about 10 years now. And for the most part, Alcoholics Anonymous has been like the focal point of my life. And there's been periods of time where, I've pursued material success before spiritual progress, right? And, whether that be usually through work and ambitions. And, where I can get fucked up is I can, be a workaholic at work and work 16-hour days and say I'm just being ambitious because I'm trying to provide for my wife and I. And the reality is I'm being ambitious because I want to do what I want to do. I want to get enough money so I can retire early. And I'm sacrificing Alcoholics Anonymous in effort to, because I think I need to handle the money situation. Like, God's got my alcoholism, right? But God's not going to take care of the job. He's not going to take care of the home life. Like, alcoholism, cool, you got this, God. But all that stuff, I can take care of. And usually what happens is I get pretty fucking miserable. And, there's been times in my sobriety where I've driven to work thinking, how can I fucking firebomb this work and get away with it?
Right.
And it's like, and then I'm stepping on the toes of my fellows, and I'm fucking shit up at home. And sponsor says, well, you know what, kid, how many new guys are you working with?
Ooh.
And I'm like, fuck you. Like, why do you always got to bring it back to what I'm doing in Alcoholics Anonymous? And so, thank God it's been a few years since I've really gotten into that state of mind. But, AA and the spiritual program, the 12 steps, and like whether that you do NA or AA or whatever, like the steps are the steps, in my opinion, and the spiritual principles will yield the same results no matter what, right? I do AA because that's what I started doing. I mean, I'm lucky being in Southern California where we can basically, I can look up a meeting right now and I can probably make it to 5 meetings by 6 o'clock within 20 miles of my house, and so I'm extremely spoiled. I know not everybody else is that fortunate, but, if I do Alcoholics Anonymous, like, I've realized that like all the other, what I think are problems in my life, just kind of take care of themselves. And it's like, fuck, man, like, who would have fucking thought that these 12 steps, this hippie Easter bunny bullshit, was going to be the solution to my problem? Like, who would have thought? It doesn't make sense, but it fucking works. So, yeah, man, that's kind of like it. Like, my story. Sorry, I rambled a little much and got a little carried away, but I love talking recovery, and especially I love talking recovery about myself, because those are my like 2 favorite topics, like me and recovery. You can't go wrong.
Yeah.
So, but so that's, I mean, go. Sorry, brother.
You good. It's a powerful story. One of the questions I am curious about, how did the local meetings there fare during the COVID?
So, yeah, because obviously California out here where government tells you how many plies of toilet paper to use to wipe your ass. They all shut down. And so
Damn, man.
thank God, or they shut down and they went to Zoom. Most of them went to Zoom. And thank God, like I'm fortunate enough that the group of men, so like today, being 10 years sober, it's been outside of speaking at a meeting or being asked to lead a meeting. I haven't been to a mixed meeting like on my own choice in probably 3.5, 4 years. So I go to all men's meetings, and the men in those rooms, we stepped up and we said, hey, like my backyard's open this Tuesday night, my backyard's open this Thursday night. And so we would, at times we would have 15 to 25 guys sitting in a backyard talking recovery, having a meeting.
That's
And
where it's at, man. That's where it's at right there.
Absolutely. Bringing new guys, it was open. Like, oh, you got a wet one? Bring him, bring him to the fucking meeting. And I'm fortunate and I'm blessed to be in a group of men that, where Alcoholics Anonymous is number one, and they're guys that we call each other on our bullshit. If dude's complaining about something, I'm like, okay, well, what's your part? And like, yeah, I noticed you're skipping some meetings lately. You think it has anything to do with it? And so it's very much like hold each other accountable. But those men, dude, I could call fucking 20 dudes in my phone books tonight at 2 a.m. if I'm stranded on the side of the freeway, and they would be there. And so it's they're my family, and it's a fucking awesome fellowship, that we got out here. We're fortunate. I'm very fortunate.
That you touched on a certain point, man, and I think it's so important that we inform people, especially those on the outside looking in who may one day need the helping hand of Alcoholics Anonymous or NA, that these programs are so much more than just not using. Like you're literally changing years and years of unhealthy coping mechanisms. You're learning how to approach this thing called life, how to be a productive member of society, and not just not average member. Like I'm talking like upper echelon of humility, humanity, all the good things that you think about the human experience. That's what we learn to espouse, or at least try to, and yeah, dude, what a beautiful dude.
It is absolutely beautiful, man. Like it's one of those things, like, I trust, like, I would trust most men in my inner circle in Alcoholics Anonymous to like escort my wife home if she was shit-faced drunk and nothing funny would happen, and it's like, I can't say that about like my coworkers that are quote unquote friends, they're going to get a little handsy and make a move. But like these dudes in Alcoholics Anonymous, and the cool thing is, dude, they like early on, they invited me into their homes, and I got to see like how they treated their wives, how they treated their kids. And I was like, holy fuck, like these guys aren't full of shit. Like they just ain't doing this in the meeting. They actually live this. And like, they would share experiences. Like AA taught me how to be a good employee. My sponsor was big on like, there's that saying, meeting makers make it. And I don't think that means people that go to meetings make it. I think that means, and it's been my experience, the people that make it are the ones that make the meeting happen. The ones that get there to set up, the ones that do the coffee, the ones that pick up cigarette butts. And so AA taught me, show up early, stay late, go above and beyond, be helpful. And, I think it's paid extreme dividends in my professional life, in my home life. It's paid dividends everywhere. Like you just said, man, that like it fucking has made me a better human being. It made me the human. It just turned me into the guy I always wanted to be.
Yep.
And it's like, fuck, that's the power of Alcoholics Anonymous, or NA, the 12 steps, this spiritual way of life.
Yeah. NA formulated with the help of Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm a big time history buff when it comes to these programs, and
Okay.
one of the guys who is largely responsible for the traditions portion of the basic text. His name was Greg P. He's passed on, but
Okay.
in his old history workshops that he had, he addresses a letter that was received to one of the first founding members of NA from Bill W. himself, and
Oh
just
wow.
hearing that correspondence going back and forth. That man, it's just there's so much to it, and we are in such a different time where cats like you and me are seen as someone who can potentially get this deal eventually someday. Whereas back then, when AA and NA first started, man, they didn't have a hope for people like us. You know, we didn't
No.
get sober. It didn't happen, you know?
It, exactly. I mean, I remember I read up on AA history like you do with AA and NA, and like, man, they would take us and they would lock us up in the asylum. You
Yep.
know, a dude that couldn't get sober, they would lock you up and throw away the fucking key. And it would take people going to the judge to be like, we'll sponsor this dude. We'll take him out of here, and if it doesn't work out, we'll bring him back or whatnot. You know, and yeah, it's fucking amazing. And like, I believe like the big book was divinely written, because it's like, you know, I go to 2 big book studies a week. 2 of my meetings are big book studies. And, you know, I read that text, and I believe it's a blueprint. You know, I call it a
Yep.
text because this is my way to live. It's not just a book. It's something that should be studied. And you know, I read that, and it's like, this was written fucking what, 80, almost 90 years ago, and it makes sense in my life. What the fuck? You know,
Yeah.
how does
Yeah.
that work? You know, and there's an old guy, old timer Charlie. He's about 35 years sober. Funny little short, angry fucker. He says, my sponsor told me when I first got sober, I needed to learn the big book inside and out so I can know who's full of shit. And I was like, that makes sense.
Yeah. Hell yeah.
So
Yeah, we got
yeah,
those.
right
You
on,
see,
brother.
I started out in AA myself, you know, and I still
Okay.
go to. I actually got voluntold to chair this AA meeting
Okay.
that I'm
Okay.
chairing this month, so I still got a lot of love for AA. But one of my very first sponsors, he's an old hard nosed, you know, cat, old timer.
Yeah.
He bought me a big book, handed it to me. He said, "Open it up to the first page," and it was blank. He said, "That's exactly how much you know. Your job is
Yo.
to shut the fuck up for the next 30 days and not say a word. Just listen."
I fucking love it. I love it. I love it.
Yeah,
And
man.
and and that's, I mean, I don't know, like with society, like, you know, I'm in upper management at my work, and you know, we're in construction. But even in construction, you know, the new young cats that come in, like, and they're in their 20s, it's like, man, when I was coming up in the industry, my boss, there was no room for bullshit. And now it's, you got to coddle them. And my old boss would say, your thank you is a paycheck at the end of the week. That's your fucking
Yep.
thank you. And
Yep.
now it's like, hey, job well done, guys. Let's have a high fives. You know, here's a gift card for doing well today, type of thing. And it's, you know, I've seen it kind of come into AA, that whole like, oh, dude, like, here, everything's going to be okay. And man, the guys told me everything ain't going to be okay. You're fucked. You're dying. You're
Yeah.
dying of alcoholism, dude. It is not okay. And they told me the truth, no matter how much it hurt, but it was the truth about my condition. And you know, I love that old school, you know, shut the fuck up, you don't know shit, AA or NA, you
Yeah.
know.
Work the steps or die, motherfucker. That's what they used to say all the time, you know?
Fuck, fucking A. That's the reality, right?
Yep. That's it. That's absolutely
Yeah.
it. So,
Yeah.
you and I connected because of Liberty Twitter. So, you know, kind of real quick, like
Yeah.
how did you, especially living where you live, or maybe that's why you've kind of drifted into liberty and libertarianism, but what happened there? How'd you get get to that spot?
So it's a funny thing. I mean, growing up here, San Diego, it's obviously a heavy heavy military town, right?
Yeah.
And I grew up like East County, so it's pretty red conservative. And so growing up, like I remember being in high school when 9/11 happened, right? And the Patriot Act and that whole thing. And my attitude was like, oh, turn the Middle East into an ashtray, like, oh, the Patriot Act's fine. Like, if you got nothing to hide, what does it matter if they're spying on you?
Right.
So I was a good little fucking neocon. I was just all about, what do you have to worry? The state's here to protect us, all that bullshit. And it was 2007, 6-ish. I go to Chico State, and my roommate up at college, he introduced me to Alex Jones, and he showed me some like videos and stuff like that, and I'm like, oh shit, some of this stuff makes a little sense. And then obviously 2008 Ron Paul, and he was a huge Ron Paul supporter, and he started just like kind of spoon feeding me this shit. And so I started watching that, and I was like, fuck, the dude's actually making pretty good sense. Like they hate us because we bomb the fuck out of them. That checks out. Like, and I started to practice like a little introspection there and be like, well, fuck, how would I feel if some country from some far off land bombed my house with my wife and kids in it? I'd probably make it my, life goal to kill those fuckers. And so that's where the shift kind of started to happen. And then, the last few years drinking, I mean, I got sober in 2011. So from like 2008, getting introduced to Ron Paul and getting loaded, I didn't put much thought to it. I'm worried about where my next bag is. But then once I got sober, I started to like actually get interested in philosophy. I like learning and expanding my knowledge. And I got introduced, I'm sure you've heard, him, Adam Kokesh on YouTube.
Oh yeah.
Right. And so I start watching Kokesh videos once I get sober, and I'm like, fuck. And that started kind of my evolution where I was like constitutionalist, like, oh, we need, minarchist, we need to have like, just the smallest amount of government possible. And then it just kept on like, progressing to full on like I'm ANCAP or agorist, like, where I think the elimination of the state should be the end goal, a completely voluntary free society. And so it was just kind of this natural progression. And, I'd say since I've been sober, I haven't voted and I haven't bought into the duopoly of the two-party system, and it's just one of those things like, and I do see like Dave Smith and some of the other like liberty, talking heads, the idea of, well, like, let's spread the message through the Libertarian Party and spread that idea. But like for me, ultimately, the end goal should be like the elimination of the state. And so I'm pretty like, I don't try to put labels, but like anarchist, like hardcore, like no state, we could voluntarily do this. Like we're all peaceful people. We can make it fucking work,
Yeah.
So that's where I'm at. And I'm always open to like, if somebody presents evidence to me right now today that could change my way of thinking on that, fuck yeah, but so I'm always open to new ideas and learning. But I definitely, especially with corona over the past year and the medicine mandates, all that stuff that's kind of been coming down the pipeline, it's just I don't think we're trending in the right direction, and I hope that enough people wake up to where we can kind of avert it. But I don't think I have very high hopes for, the future of the state. So,
man.
Yeah, that I'm kind of black pilled at this point. I don't have much hope. I'm like, it's all fucked. Burn it down.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I think it's like, it's less of a black pill and it's more of just like understanding exactly like what you're capable of doing. I mean, at least that's where I've wound myself up at,
Sure.
Like my white pills come from the meetings, man, and the people I meet in recovery. And that's like focus on what I can do. And that's, foster this as much as possible.
Exactly. And like, what is, for you guys like you and I, what's our primary purpose? It's to carry this message and help another alcoholic drug addict. And so,
Mm-hmm.
I try to, I try to be prepared and stay up to date with like what's going on. And I'm all for like fighting for liberty. But at the end of the day, like, I I trust and believe that if I'm trying to perform God's will in my life, and God's will in my life is pretty simple, I try not to complicate it. It's to help another drunk and be useful to other people. So if I'm doing those things, like there's no reason for me to believe that all my needs aren't going to be met. Because God hasn't brought me this far and dropped me on my ass. There hasn't been a time that I'm like, hungry and not be able to pay the bills. I've always had enough. So
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
try not. Yeah, so just try not to get caught up in the minutia, in the bullshit of it, right? It's like, okay, what can I control? Well, I can't control a whole lot, so let's just worry about what I can.
Yeah, you mentioned Ron Paul, and I'm real envious of all the people who like live that moment, which I guess we're kind of getting, from what I can gather, another resurgence of it via the Mises Caucus and the Dave Smith and all of that. But man, when Ron Paul was like really
Yeah.
making waves, I was high as hell. Like I was not paying any bit of attention to anything except for,
Yeah.
where's that dub sack at right now, and so
Yeah. Exactly. I mean, I wasn't like going to Ron Paul rallies, that's for sure. It was more, oh, this guy's talking some fucking sense. Fuck it, I got a bag to do,
right.
So
Yeah.
But even just going back and watching it on YouTube, doing the deep dive, if it even is still there anymore, probably not. It's probably been censored and taken off the internet. But
Glory
going
hole.
back and looking at it, going back and looking at it and being like, oh fuck, that motherfucker made a lot of fucking sense, dude. Yeah, he was right.
Fuck yeah. Well, man,
Yeah.
Derek,
So.
thank you so much for coming on. Awesome story, man. Thank you. I needed to hear that, and I know that there's obviously other people out there that need to hear it as well. But before we wrap up, there's one thing I ask all the people who share their story to do, and that is, if you could speak directly to the one person in the audience who is struggling to get sober, what would you tell them?
That's a cool question, because like it's kind of like when I'm sponsoring a new guy or approaching that new guy, and my experience is that, like, no matter how you're feeling right now, if you're struggling with drinking, drugging, you never have to drink again. And we do have an answer to how that's possible, and you never have to feel the way you do right now. Like I shared in my story, that last day drinking, what I thought was the darkest day of my life, right, and an all-time low, I look back today and I think was one of the best moments of my life, because it got me willing to do the work, and it got me to where I am here 10 years later. So if you're feeling lonely, just know that you're not alone. Other people have felt that way. I have felt that way. And I can guarantee you that there are dozens, hundreds of people out there, whether, no matter what city you're in, you can walk into a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, NA, CA, Heroin Anonymous, whatever, and there will probably be a dozen people that will do anything they can to help you out. And so that's my biggest thing, is you're not alone. And even though like guys like me and Clean here have built a life together, built a life up through staying sober. We were at your point at one point also. So yeah, that's probably it, man. It's just you're not alone out there. That's the biggest thing.
Very, very well put, man. And I agree wholeheartedly. You're definitely not alone. So,
Yeah.
well, Derek, if somebody listened to you, they really liked hearing from you, is there any way for them to get a hold of you?
Yeah, you can hit me up on Subby on Twitter. That's SUBBY. Feel free to DM me anytime. Lately I've been pretty wrapped up with work, so it may take me a minute to get back to you, but I will get back to you, and I'll answer any questions and help out in any way I can.
Right on. Well, thanks a lot, Derek. We'll have to bring you back on later on down the line.
Right on, brother. Yeah, we can talk all anything else you want to talk about. I love talking about it all, and I thank you for having me on, and I had an absolute blast, my man.
Right on, man. Well, you have a good one.
All right, you too, brother.
All right, there you go. Thanks a lot again to Derek for coming on and sharing his story and sharing some of that old school AA stuff. Guys, I don't know if you've noticed or not, and if you've been around the rooms, you've certainly seen this kind of transition that just the society has made to where we coddle and baby newcomers. And I really think it's to their detriment. I don't think it's for the betterment of the program as a whole. I needed to be told straight up with gut level honesty that all that shit going on in my head, it didn't matter. All that mattered was that I needed to stay sober, and how can I apply the spiritual principles to my life to do that? And so there it was, and there was plenty of that in Derek's story. I thoroughly enjoyed that, and I hope you did as well. And so that's it, guys. Have a great Thanksgiving. Have an awesome Turkey Day. Love your family. Give them a big hug. Make sure you eat some pecan pie or pumpkin pie or whatever else. And just, have a good one. And we'll transition into the song of the day. I think I've played this one before, but this is Pat the Bunny. The song is called More About Alcoholism. And the title speaks for itself. Pat was one of those guys who used to tour the country getting loaded quite a bit. He was in the Wingnut Dishwashers Union, eventually went and did his own solo thing. I don't know if he did that when he got sober or if it just kind of started, but he talks a lot about getting sober, finding recovery, and just has some great tunes to do it with. So without any further ado, here is Pat the Bunny.
Everything to love life in the shadow.